to Wish I Had Known, the show where hindsight meets insight. Host Jodie Lamb has worn many hats in the world of finance, from navigating the intricacies of financial planning to unraveling the mysteries of insurance claims and diving deep into the realm of structured settlements. Each episode explores the topics that make you say, if only I had known this sooner. Join the conversation as we uncover the insights that can make all the difference. This is Wish I Had Known, because knowledge is power and hindsight is 20/20.
Welcome back to a special episode of Wish I Had Known. Today, we're joined live with Scott McKenzie. He's here to talk to us today about his law practice, his start as an attorney out of law school, and some very interesting stories along the way. A very unique twist to the Wish I Had Known series. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you. First of all, why don't you tell us about who you are and what you do and where you practice?
Well, my full name is Donald Scott McKenzie, and I grew up in Southern California, moved to Texas in 1995 after spending some years in the trucking industry and the oil and gas industry. Decided I wanted to pursue an honest living for a change, and I went to law school. And by comparison, yeah, it was a much more legitimate business. Graduated in 2002, passed the bar, got my license, and just wanted to start my own practice. Obviously, a lot of the people I went to school with, they went to different firms, they went to different practice fields, and really didn't have the opportunity to set their own career. But having already been in the corporate world and having been in different industries, I didn't want to go back to having a boss putting those kind of demands on me, especially as I had a young family. We were growing at the time. And opened up my practice, got very lucky in the first couple of years. And that luck has held through now for 23 years. Landed some really big cases in the first 18 months that surprised me and a lot of people. Yeah. It turns out there's a lot of people out there who've been done wrong by various entities or people, and they're looking for help. And I've been able to provide that help. And I haven't had very many upset clients. Most of my clients are very grateful for my work. You can look at my reviews, and some of them are very heartfelt, and some of them have made me feel like I actually had a positive influence on somebody's life. And that's a nice thing. My practice is focused mostly on injury, but I also handle criminal defense. I've never I have represented companies in complex bankruptcy actions early in my practice, but I gravitated away from working for businesses and focused mostly on individuals because I felt that was the most rewarding for me and for my clients.
So in hindsight, when you were going through your legal studies and starting your new business out of law school, it sounds like your past experience kind of gave you direction for not necessarily going to the big law firm, but starting your own firm. Any hindsight from that experience that maybe a aspiring lawyer or a newly graduated attorney starting their own practice might learn from your experience?
Well, the biggest mistake is getting into the business and not having a mentor at the time, somebody who could give me any guidance. So a lot of it was just shooting blindly in the dark. And that works to a large extent, surprisingly. A law license changes your life in ways that people who aren't a lawyer wouldn't understand. But how people treat you in every interaction changes, whether it be getting your car repaired or getting something fixed at the house. Nobody wants to cross you. Nobody wants to upset you. And suddenly your world changes. It's the power of being an attorney. A lot of people are afraid of it, justifiably, because, if I were a mean person, I could ruin somebody's life legally, sue them into oblivion and just harass them. And there's lawyers who get off on that kind of thing. I see it. It's my industry is infested with a lot of people with personality disorders. That's one thing I tell any person pursuing the interest of practicing law is be prepared to deal with a lot of people who are not pleasant, and are very full of themselves. But you'll run into that in many industries. But in law, yeah, there is quite a few sociopaths in the business, and you encounter them and you learn how to deal with them. They don't have any more power than any other attorney. It's just sometimes they have bigger mouths. But that usually backfires on them. I've found, if I treat people with respect and treat people the way I want to be treated, most of them come around and behave. Some of them don't, and you're going to run into that. And be prepared for that. Be prepared for the personality conflict, and be prepared to not let the power of being an attorney go to your head, because that's what ruins the personality of so many lawyers that I know, who start out as really nice people. And over the years, you just see them become very degrading and abusive of people because they can get away with it.
So year one, you're right out of law school. Maybe you're not quite to that state yet. Where are you at year one versus year 3 and 5 in your career?
After you have a few big scores and you realize that the money's out there, you start to lose the panic feeling. You start your own business, whether it be law or making sandwiches, it's getting customers through the door. And that first couple of years where it's like, wow, how am I going to pay the bills 2 months out, 3 months out? And then after you have a few big scores, it starts to become a lot easier to say, well, hey, I've got enough here. I can keep my office running for the next year. You're able to take a breath. You're able to think more clearly. And by year 23, I don't operate with any fear anymore. I know I can go out and pick up jobs. I now choose the ones I want to take, and I can pick up more if I need them. Well, and if I need more time to myself, I can turn down jobs.
What would the 23-year-old self say to the first year attorney?
This will sound strange given the what your form of your show is here. What I wish I had known. What I wish I had known is that you shouldn't be looking back at your prior decisions and worrying so much about them. Did I make the right decision, wrong decision? Navel gazing at yourself about prior actions, because you can't change them. All you can do is learn from them, and you can move forward and hope that whatever you did wrong in the past, you can improve upon and get better at it. And like anything else, that's why they call it practicing law. With practice, you get better, whether it's interacting with human beings or understanding how insurance companies operate, or understanding how courts operate, or how individual judges. One thing I do see with younger attorneys that they didn't understand, that I did understand from an early stage, is that the people like the clerks, the court coordinators, those are the people who make the system operate. And those are the people you need to be really nice to. You're better off to have them in your corner. If there's a problem, they'll call you and tell you, hey, Scott, you forgot to take care of this. You see a lot of younger attorneys come in and their heads are big with the power, and don't you know who I am, or talking down to the court coordinator. And those are the guys whose files get screwed up, where, oh, hey, you didn't know that deadline was coming up? I've got court coordinators who call me up and remind me for deadlines as if they were my own staff. And that's just because I've been kind to them.
I find when I'm working with attorneys on a regular basis in my job, I find that even working with the paralegals, the receptionists, getting into the gatekeepers, getting past the gatekeepers is a challenge. So what other than just being kind and being respectful to everybody, regardless of their title, what has worked best for you?
If you make a mistake, acknowledge it, apologize, and try not to make the same mistake again. Don't try to defend bad decisions, and definitely don't try to defend bad results. You have to accept that in this business, you're not always going to get a good result for everybody. You can only try to get good results for everybody, but you can't succeed at that. It's impossible. Sometimes it's bad facts. Sometimes it's bad clients. Sometimes it's just bad luck. And there's things you can't do to fix things for somebody who needs your help. And so you've got to learn to not internalize it, to not make it become a burden on your shoulders. I represent my clients. I do my best for my clients, but I can't break my heart for my clients, because I have multiple clients and I'm obligated to each one individually.
Well, some of them make bad choices, and perhaps they've made choices that they can learn from. Any interesting stories from their experiences that we should wish we had known before we end up having to call you for such a...
Well, the criminal side of my practice is generally people who made bad decisions. And so I could go into miles and miles of that, whether it be, the guy who's got his fourth drunk driving, or somebody who's beat up his wife, or robbed a bank, or insurance fraud, or, I've represented people from all walks of life doing all sorts of silly crimes. Sometimes I've represented priests, I've represented doctors. People get into a bad situation, and then you got to try to make the best of it and get them out of it with the least damage. On the civil side, all the time, I see people who make bad decisions, but usually those are the people who are liable. Those are the defendants in my cases. Generally, my cases involve somebody who, went to a house to be invited to, to a birthday party, and the homeowner's two pit bulls decide to tear into them. And this is the third person they've bit, yet they still keep the dogs around people. That's a bad decision. Or somebody who drives drunk and causes an accident and injures a family, like the case we just resolved this week. She went out, had a few drinks with her friends, decided, I'm okay to drive home. She wasn't okay. She put two people in the hospital. She ended up doing a little bit of jail time behind that, and her insurance company didn't want to pay, and ultimately we had to file it, and they made a series of bad decisions, and ultimately they paid policy limits on it. So we got what we could for them. Probably my favorite tale is a guy who used to be a neighbor of mine before I was an attorney. And he moved away. He went to Hillsborough, and he was a Vietnam vet. He never made it back from Vietnam. He was one of those unfortunate fellas. He lived in a commercial building in a town called Hillsborough. The city of Hillsborough decided, hey, we're not going to have John living in this condemned building. We need him out of here. Now, John grew up. He was born and raised in Hillsborough. Left high school there, joined the Army, became a tunnel rat, and was shipped to Vietnam. Decorated Silver Star combat veteran. Really nice guy, but not all there, and he was living in this building, which was a maze of boxes and junk stacked in a warehouse. And he had a little cubby where he lived in there. And he called me up one day, hey, the city's trying to kick me out, Scott, and I don't have any money. Can I help you out? Can you help me out? Oh, John. Well, so I go down there to see him. He agreed to pay me with an old watch of his, but I didn't do it for the money. I liked John. He was a nice guy. Now, out of a series of just bad decisions by the city and their legal counsel, they did everything they could to cost themselves a ton of money. They hired a big law firm out of Waco.
Why do that?
I didn't understand it, but I think a lot of it had to do with small town politics. And I think there was some of the locals who were on the city council wanted his building because there was a lot of talk about, hey, well, we'll pay this, we'll pay that. He didn't want to sell. He wanted to stay there. He liked it. That was his hometown. He wasn't going to go without a fight. Well, they hired a big shot law firm. They removed it to federal court because I had filed a temporary injunction to keep them from going in. They'd put up notices saying they were going to send the SWAT team in, sheriffs, to forcibly remove them from this property. I got a 14-day TRO, temporary restraining order, on the city of Hillsborough that said, hey, 14 days, give us time to cool this down. Let me talk to John. Now, the funny thing is that TRO was in the county court in Hillsborough, and the judge told me and my client, he said, look, John, in 14 days, I'm going to let the city come in and remove you. You have to understand, this is your last at-bat. Well, we leave. I go home. Next day, I get a call from this big shot lawyer down in Waco with one of the bigger firms in Waco. He says, well, we've removed this case to federal court because this is a federal question. When you sue a governmental entity, it becomes a federal question.
Okay.
A bad decision in this case. Horrible decision on their part. They didn't understand that my name is Donald Scott McKenzie. They thought my name was Scott McKenzie because that's what I go by. Everybody knows me as Scott, have since I was little. Well, he called him and says, well, you're going to have to get another attorney to handle this because you're not licensed in the Western District of Texas. Yeah, I am. I've been licensed in the Western District of Texas since my first year. This was my fourth or fifth year practicing when this was all happening. Well, no, we looked you up. There is no Scott McKenzie license. Well, did you look up Donald Scott McKenzie? Because that's how I'm registered with the state bar. And I could hear in that moment of silence from him that somebody was going to lose their job. At that point, I just knew it. Having been in the corporate world, I knew that silence. He was like, because he knew he was off base.
All right, you're leaving us hanging. What happened to John here?
Oh, it's back. Okay, we get to federal court. We end up in front of Judge Smith, who was a pretty renowned judge in the Western District. He doesn't like law enforcement. He doesn't trust city entities. He oversaw the Branch Davidian cases, and so he'd seen extreme abuses that had led to tragedy. So he really put the brakes on this case. The city came out, guns blazing. They wanted an immediate hearing. They wanted this. They wanted that. He said, all right, well, we'll set it for hearing in 6 months. So now we went from 14 days to now 6 months. We show up for the hearing in 6 months. The city's still guns blazing. You know, we want them out. They put up the code enforcement officer on the stand, and he tells about how this building is just a maze of boxes, impossible to get around, and little narrow passageways.
Continuation of his kind of stuck in knob, hasn't really come home.
Well, they painted a picture of a very dangerous premises that, if you sent in the sheriffs, people could get hurt. Well, they went on with all this about how dangerous it was, and they wanted him out of there immediately. My only defense, I didn't have anybody to testify for John other than him. I put John on the stand. John, I'll never forget it, too, because I said, John, tell us about yourself. Where were you born? I was born right here in Hillsboro. I was born at the hospital, whatever it was, the regional hospital in Hillsboro. And where'd you go to high school? Right down the street at the high school. And what'd you do after high school? Well, I knew I was going to be drafted, so I went and joined the Army. Well, what'd you do in the Army? Well, they put me in specialized training because I'm short, and they trained me as a tunnel rat. And as soon as he said tunnel rat, I could see Judge Smith turn and look at the witness. And I could see the wheels turning in the judge's head. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking, wait a minute, Hillsboro wants to send in a team of sheriffs into a darkened maze with a former tunnel rat. There's no good outcome for that. There's going to be, sheriffs leaving in body bags if they did that. And that was kind of the picture I wanted to paint, but I didn't expect the judge to catch it as quickly as he did. The judge interrupted us at that point, said he didn't need any more testimony, and he'd issue a decision at some point in the future. 18 months later, this is now 2 years from when I had filed the TRO, the law firm in Waco calls me and says, look, if you'll agree to dismiss your actions, we'll dismiss all of our actions, and we'll leave John alone. Okay, explain that to me. So the clients don't want to continue paying the monthlies to keep this case open. And it doesn't appear Judge Smith is going to issue a ruling anytime soon. They had filed 2 or 3 times trying to encourage asking the judge to issue a ruling and findings of fact, and there was never a response.
So the judge wasn't going to be very cooperative.
Yeah, the judge didn't care. He was old. There was nobody, they couldn't appeal a decision he didn't make.
Got it.
Right. And so he just left them hanging and said, oh, well, I'm still deliberating. 24 months later, we dismissed the case. This was 2007-ish. John Fink lived in that building till the day he died. He died about 6 months ago. So I basically bought him 19 years of them leaving him the heck alone. He'd call me periodically, and he'd laugh. Every time the sheriff drives by, they look away. They don't look at me. Nobody makes eye contact with me. They just don't want to even mess with them. And so, now his building has moved on. The city, 19 years later, unfortunately for them, it got resolved. But, he got to live out the rest of his life the way he wanted, in the town he wanted to live in. And the city didn't get to take anything away from him.
That's a remarkable story to not only to his successful outcome and your perseverance, but is there a takeaway from that experience?
The takeaway I got from it was that the city and their attorneys approached it from a position of arrogance. And the world gives back to you what you put in it. You go in with bad intent, you're probably going to end up with a bad result. And they came after him thinking he'd be a pushover, that they'd take his building from him, they'd probably sell it for a profit, and they were going to get away with abusing him. And then once I got involved, they said, all right, well, let's get a big shot law firm and go, abuse his lawyer and him. And they figured by removing it to federal court, which cost the city tens of thousands of dollars to accomplish, that they were going to suddenly have a win and that they were going to have control of the case. And instead, it just went out of their control. And the city ended up spending tens of thousands of dollars over 24 months, and they accomplished absolutely nothing.
So for the aspiring attorneys, for the people that are potentially in need of your services, if there's follow-up questions, if they want to know more about you, if they want to retain your services, how do they find you?
Well, they can go to my webpage. My webpage is scottmckenzie.com, SCOTTMACKENZIE.com. Or they can email me, that's easy enough, dallaslaw@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or they can give me a phone call, 214-245-4625.
There you go. Scott, this is interesting to me because I'm not an attorney. I work with attorneys on a regular basis. Typically, I deal in the personal injury space. So the criminal stories of your experience is always entertaining, and you have a fun little tagline that I occasionally hear you use.
Got caught, call Scott.
There you go. There's another wrap to another interesting conversation here on Wish I Had Known. If you got caught, call Scott. Apparently, though, if you're an aspiring attorney, follow your heart. Follow what brings you joy in working with your clients, doing what the right thing is, whether it be helping someone unintentionally from 14 days to 19 years taking care of them. There's good that happens. I think it's too easy to get caught up in the legal profession. And like you said, get kind of,
they lose
position, lost sight of the opportunity to do good in the world.
That's right. I didn't make a lot off of John's case, but it was one of the best cases I've ever been involved in.
Yeah. The intrinsic value, far better than the monetary. All right. Any final parting words?
No. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Well, this is another interesting conversation where we get to learn insight information so that we don't have to say, wish I had known. We never know where we're going to find ourselves. So I look forward to talking to you. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Mr. Mackenzie, or if you have any interesting stories or questions that you would like to have answered, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or hashtag Ask Jodie. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Wish I Had Known. If you're seeking guidance, inspiration, or simply a moment of connection, join us on the next episode. Thanks.
To today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe so you can hear all of Jodie's chats, so you don't have to say, wish I had known.